All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started, but please keep putting your comments in the chat. And I will point out that I'm going to stop at a couple intervals to answer questions you may have. I'm going to kind of go over a lot of different things, touch a lot of different programs here, and I don't want to get too ahead of the question game. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A panel. And I'll stop and Justin will prompt me if a hot topic comes up while I'm talking. So we are talking today about Revit and SQL and all of the data that we have at our disposal in our firms and how to mine for those data gold nuggets. So of course, first up, we have to do learning objectives. Everybody gets really excited about learning objectives, right? Today, we're going to talk about how do we extract that data from all of the platforms that we have in our firms. How do we tailor that data so it becomes a more manageable and understandable set of data? How do we merge and visualize those data sources? And we're going to use Power BI today, but there are other methods available, of course. And then we're going to start to look at an interactive dashboard that we can utilize in our business development, in financial forecasting, and even in design methodology. So there's a ton you can do with this data once you start to get a handle on where it is, how to get to it. So let's dive in a little bit. First about me, I am a registered architect. I am a director of technology at my firm. Been working for many years, but primarily in Revit. Started on version 6, I believe back in 2003. So it's been a long time in Revit. My Twitter handle is amwatkins26. I will caution that it contains some sports things as well. So it ranges from Revit and computational design to Pittsburgh sports. So have at it. A little bit about my firm. I'm with Design Collective. We are based in Baltimore. We also have an office in Chicago. We've been around for 40 plus years. We are 100% employee owned, and we are super proud of the Guinness Open Gate Brewery. That is the first Guinness brewery in North America in almost a century. So really exciting project. Hope you can visit. It's in Baltimore here. The sectors we work in, we're multidisciplinary, as most firms are these days: architecture, interiors, landscape, planning and design, and urban design, and signage and graphic design. And those are going to come into play a little bit later as we start to look at the sector data that we have at our fingertips. So today, the heart of what we're talking about is really business intelligence, right? It's how do we start to wrangle, again, all that data that we have and be smarter about it and learn from it? So just to define business intelligence, there are many definitions out there. The one I like is pretty simple. And at the heart of it is using technology to transform that data into actionable insights, which can inform an organization's business decisions. Pretty simple, right? And again, I point out technology is at the heart of this. I will also pause for a second and say I am not a database administrator. I am not an expert in Power BI. I am not a SQL expert. So these tools that I'm going to show you are accessible to the masses. You do not need to be a guru at any of them. And hopefully this will reveal more ways that all of us can start to look at data differently. So the business intelligence tools out there, go back for a second, sorry about that. Power BI, we're going to talk about that one today primarily. Tableau is also a great one. And Excel, of course, is a great spreadsheet manager. It lets you reveal data and connect data sources. And we all know it, we've all used it for a long time, but Power BI lets us visualize it differently than Excel does. So I'm going to talk about that primarily because it is free to those of us that subscribe to the Microsoft Enterprise solutions. All right, so as we mentioned, we AE firms have data sources kind of scattered all throughout our servers. We're going to take a little bit of look at that in a few minutes here. But you know, it's a big data, it's small data, it's it's all kind of disparate and they're all siloed. So our goal is to start to form relationships between those sets of data, and those relationships can really start to reveal information about your design process or your financial process as it relates to business development. It evolves over time. It can be climate data and how that relates to BIM design and data. So when we start to reveal those interconnections in those buckets, we can begin to bring together other voices into the conversations. You know, we don't all like to look at spreadsheets all day long. It's not fun. It's not compelling. We went to architecture or engineering school to design buildings. We didn't do it to develop spreadsheets. And what it does is it ultimately democratizes that data so that all levels of staff end up having a clearer picture of the firm direction. And I put in there, we're all visual learners. We learn much faster when we see it in a graphic form than in a text form. So what are design collectives buckets of data? We're going to get a little more specific now. We have our finance platform, our ERP, which is in a database, a SQL database. We have Vision in the, for business development, and that's a SQL database. GIS is in Esri's ArcGIS. Our projects all have their own databases. Are on the file server. We have Open Asset, which is a cloud-hosted server, which hosts all of our project imagery. We have the USGBC and the AIA data exchange site for complying with AIA 2030. And of course, we have Revit and the BIM information. And some of that is hosted on the server. Some of that is hosted on the construction cloud or BIM 360 or whatever they're calling it these days. So now we kind of get a sense of what the data is and where it is. And we're looking at this web of, all right, what can we do with it? Where do we even start? How do we get from that picture of what our data is to something like this that's more of a dashboard of interconnected information about geography and cost and area and sector? So we're going to get into that in a little bit here. Yeah, how do we get to it? How do we get to that data that we were talking about? Well, it's about to go down. We're going to start to dive in here. So we're going to stop PowerPoint, thankfully. Didn't want to go too long into slides. And what we're going to do is jump into our project database. And let's go to what's called Deltek PIM, Project Information Management. And I'm going to go right to the server. I've remoted into that PIM server, and it's the backend server. Not too exciting, right? We're going to jump into that data drive. I'm going to go to SQL, data resource. And here's the main SQL Server database for our project information. And you can see it's about almost 16 gigabytes of data. I'm not going to open that with any kind of resource right now. That's just going to be, that'll take too long, and we won't be able to glean in any real good information out of that. But I just wanted to point out how this data exists on different servers throughout the organization. So this is the front end, which is really a web interface for that database. And all it is a way to get to different projects or different reports that you've run or files that you've uploaded or published. So I'm going to jump right to a specific project just because it's kind of one of the examples in the dashboard. And if we jump to that tab, we start to see contacts, we can see documents, and really what I want to start to look at is just as a for instance, the contract management data that we have associated with it. This project is under construction, so we know that we're going to have some RFIs and submittals. And if I reload this page, it's going to take a second or two. It's going to come up with all the submittals and all the RFIs. Great. I still don't have a really good picture of what's going on over time. What are my durations of review for these things? What are the specific disciplines that are getting the most RFIs? This system has some built-in analytics, but it's really only for punch lists right now, and it's not manipulable by me at all. It's not customizable. So what I want to do is go back to that contract management report site, and I just want to export this out to Excel. And the quickest way, there's a quick link here, hit export to Excel. I'm not going to do it because I've already done it, but it's really fast. Hit the button, boom, there it goes. And I want to just take a look at what that looks like. And that's was an Excel site. So here's the Excel file. It's signing into the server to update the data. So it maintains that connection, even though it's a different file type than the SQL database. There we go, we've updated, and it's got all the most current information. So now we've got Excel, it's got information about cost, it's got completion dates, it's got who did it. There's a lot of information in here that was not available on the web interface. But still, I don't have any kind of connection to this data to maybe building geometry or to project fee or region, for instance. There's no information about contractor. So I'm going to close this report. Yep, let's save it. And so that's one example of exporting data out of a database that starts to become usable, and we can now manipulate that data for our use. Now we're going to jump into Revit. And remember, I'm right now focusing on pulling data out of our resources so that we can manage and manipulate it. So we're going to jump over to Revit. And everybody knows and loves this sample house project. It's been around for maybe 8 years or so and probably hasn't been changed whatsoever except for upgrading it. And there's a ton of data, as we know, embedded in this model. There's things like a planting schedule. There's quantities and square footages associated with materials. There are lots of ways to get data out of Revit, including just exporting that schedule out or a room schedule. And then I get information about the room number, name, and maybe the areas or departments. Let's look at another way to do that, or a couple of other ways to do that. So Dynamo is a great way to start to pull data out of models. So I'm going to jump over to Dynamo here. Start that up. And there are hundreds of scripts for pulling data out, but I'm going to focus on a method to pull data out that can be brought into Power BI in a visual format. So this is a script I wrote with lots of help from the internet and from various sources. And it's really based on pulling out vectorized lines of the floor plans, the rooms, and the information about the rooms. So quickly, this is just a Dynashapes dialog box that's been developed so that it kind of becomes easier for anybody to run. It gathers the rooms, the list of rooms. It gathers the room boundaries. It gathers the room data down here. It converts the room boundaries to lines or vectors. And finally, all the way out here, we get a saved file. So what do we do with that? That's something we can certainly bring into Power BI and start to visualize. But the problem is it's only telling a little part of the picture in this Revit model, and it's a pretty significant size graph. And what I found is, no, I'm not going to save that. That the great people at Proving Ground have developed an add-in called Tracer. These guys, this team has really focused on BIM data. And it's from Rhino, it's from ArchiCAD, it's from all kinds of other BIM tools. So if we start Tracer, you can see it's got some presets, and the presets are pretty much all I ever need to use. But really, it's looking at everything that's schedulable in the model. All the elements, all the data, work sets, walls, roofs, everything you could possibly want. You can export 2D geometry and 3D geometry. You can change the detail level that you want. And of course, the more or less detail that you export, the bigger your data set becomes. So you're always kind of balancing the size of your data set versus how nimble your dashboard becomes. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when you hit export here, it exports. I'm going to switch to maybe rooms and areas. And we're just going to export 3D versions of those. So we'll hit export here. Great. I'm going to save it, and you can see it's pretty fast. It's going to be way faster than the Dynamo version was. Now let's take a look at what's in that. So I'm going to jump over to DB Browser, and this lets you open a SQL database. So we're just going to hit Open Database, and here is that file that I just exported. And you can see it's about 5 megs. It's not very big. And what it is just comprised of a bunch of data tables that's exported right out of Revit. It gets information about latitude and longitude, so the geographic location of the model itself. File size, is the model work shared? You even get the Revit version. So all of this, you can see, you can start to leverage for maybe it becomes a data health dashboard. You get element information, you get project information, you get work set information. But again, I'm not a database administrator. I don't know how to manipulate this data, even though I can see it in a database form, which is really the back end of Revit and how it operates. I just wanted to give kind of a snapshot of what data gets exported out so that we can start to look at what we can leverage once we have a dashboard that is able to view this information differently. One more add-in I like to use in Revit for data export is the BIM Interoperabilities Tool add-in, which is wonderful, developed by Autodesk. And I use the one called Revit Model Best Practices one all the time. I'm the BIM manager for the firm, and I run these on every model weekly. And what that reveals is things like number of warnings, file size, elements that can be purged, work sets, on and on. And this is really all information about model health. Imported CAD files is a big one. We rarely allow that. So if we hit close there, let's just run the report. It'll run pretty fast here. And we can open up an HTML version of it. Just save it to my desktop there. And here's the report. And again, it's good data, doesn't really kind of give any visual information about what the warnings are or where they exist in the model. Great, it's good to know file size. It is not work shared, so that's good to know. No duplicate instances, that's great. Also, when's the last time anybody worked on a project that only had 3 warnings? Almost never happens unless you just started out. So again, all good data to have, another way to get at your Revit data, but we need to start merging this data together. And I want to point out that we don't always know what this data is going to be used for, but we kind of have an idea of the story we want to tell with this data dashboard that we're building, whether it's how does our Revit model typology relate to the geographic region we're working in, or something like that. So I'm going to pause for a second here, Justin, and see if there are any questions. Let's look at the Q&A question area here. Or the
yeah,
chat.
it's not looking like we have any, but if anybody has any questions, now would be a good time.
All right. Well, I'm going to dive into Power BI, but again, if you have any questions about pulling data out or manipulating it, please put that in the Q&A chat, and we can address that. So Power BI, I don't know if you guys know what the desktop version looks like, but here's the interface. You have your dashboard area there. It's waiting for some data to be loaded. It's got some visualizations that are preloaded, just basically charts and graphs that let you slice your data in different ways. And you can see it's waiting for some information so that it can look at fields of data. So let's just go ahead and import some Excel data. Actually, no, let's import some of that data from the SQL database that we manipulated from Tracer. So I'm going to get data from other sources here. There we go. And it uses ODBC. That is the method. Whoops. Oh, there we go. So it's looking for that database. Oh, it's not. Let's go back and do that again. Go more. Okay. ODBC, great. Select that, now hit connect. Now, important to note that there are several types of database files that can be brought in. It's a SQLite free data source, just for your reference. If I hit advanced options, this is where I make that connection. Database equals. And I do need to go over here, and I'm going to copy that path. Copy as path. Paste that in there. Get rid of the quotes. So now it is connecting to that database on our server. It's asking for credentials. I just wanted to use my Windows credentials. So now it brings up all of the different tables that are embedded in that SQL database. And really we want things like room elements, get some document information, and elements. We can import all of these. We don't really need all of these. So I'm just going to hit load, and as you can see, you get a preview of what is brought in. I'll just hover over each of these. It gives you some information, and it gives you just that preview of the data that's going to be brought in. So if you hit load, it pulls it right into your dashboard, loads those tables that it queries and loads those tables. And now it's waiting for you to add some visuals. So what I'm going to do is add So you can see I've added, preloaded a couple of these visuals that the folks at Proving Ground have developed to go with Tracer. There's one for 3D visuals and there's one for 2D visuals. Let's do the 3D one. And now it's waiting for me to connect some data to it. So let's open up Element here. And I'm going to move my picture out of the way. Let's add some category data. Great. And maybe we want the mesh so that that shows up as a geometry. Oh, there we go. So that's, remember, the room geometry. And if I also add mesh here, that lets me start to select elements in other tables, and it will relate to that room geometry. So if I just hover over it, it just gives me a category. I can also add, let's remove that. I'm going to add the name information into the view. And now I get a little representation of all of the different rooms. And I can spin it around and get a little preview of what each room looks like. So I'll close that one. Let's add a table here just to get a sense of the data, again, in spreadsheet form and how that relates to the geometry. And again, I want some information about the category of element. I want the name of the element. So again, we've got a room name. I can even add the element ID in here, so that if I need to reference it in Revit, that's something that I can use in Revit to find it in the Revit model itself. So now if I select in this table here, it reveals itself in the sort of X-ray view over in the 3D representation. So you start to see how powerful this might be, because I can get, if I had exported area as part of my process, I could have seen where in the building this exists, how big it is, maybe a department information. And it becomes really interesting when you start to compare this model to maybe another model of the same type. Maybe you're looking at how different designers work. So this is just an example. I'm not going to go through building an entire dashboard out of this data, but you can see how quickly you start to be able to visualize data in different ways, where in that database we looked at, you couldn't make heads or tails of what was really going on with that database. Let me pause for questions here, see if anything's coming up or any chats.
It looks like we had one that came in. It says, is ODBC exported by using Tracer add-in?
That's correct. The Tracer add-in exports a .db file type, and that is formatted so that it comes into Power BI as ODBC. It is not live linked, so each time I want to update that information, I would need to re-export it. As you saw, it's fairly fast. I will say it's not a limitation, it's probably more of a control feature, is that it does not export linked models, but there's some interesting ways to combine those models. So if I export the structural or MEP model separately, for instance, from the architecture model, I can then combine that data in Power BI, and then it lets me visualize those either side by side or overlapped with each other. And then I can really get a sense, again, in this simple viewer of how those elements interact with each other. I saw that question just came in, so I just answered that one. All right, good stuff. Oh, one more coming through. There you go. Derek asks, hey Derek, how are you? Can a gateway be established and allow for live linking? To my knowledge, it cannot, but I believe maybe with Dynamo that can be set up. But again, that becomes a fairly intensive one when it's talking back and forth all the time. And it might be something that just creates too much chatter. But interesting concept there. What I'm going to do now is jump over to the dashboard that I've been working on for a while now. And we're just going to talk about the different data sources that it's leveraging. Really, it's the interesting part is, so it's geographic, it's financial, it's marketing, it's sector-based, it's model-based, and all of these things kind of inform the other. So over here on the left, this map of North America represents that kind of darker green color is all of the states where we have projects currently or over the last decade or so of information we have. And that data is coming from this chart, which was exported right out of our Visions software, which is our business development marketing CRM platform. Please don't ask why our financial and marketing platforms are different. That's a whole different discussion for another day. And someday, hopefully, we will be able to connect those data sources. But here you can see we can sort by project cost or project area. I will very much point out that this data is not real. I have faked it, but it started out as a real export right out of Vision. I can sort by sector. And so it's interesting to point out here that all these zeros and blanks is data missing from the database. It was never filled out by our marketing team. So it's kind of that missing garbage in, garbage out factor of, if we're not capturing that data, then we're not able to leverage it in other ways. So it's a bit of a eye-opening thing for that team to look at and say, hey, there's a lot of data missing that we need to start filling in. So we can start to slice this in different ways. Let's maybe just look at North Carolina. You can see we've got 7 projects historically in North Carolina. This little pie chart shows which sectors that data, that those projects are in. And if we start to zoom in, again, this is a visualization from Esri. So it's got that GIS data embedded in it. And as I start to zoom in, you start to see these different colors depict the per capita income of those areas or counties. And obviously around the Raleigh-Durham area, those are going to be a little higher income areas. And the closer I zoom in on them, that data starts to change. And you get a median age or current information about per capita income. And that could be really interesting in terms of, all right, if I have some multifamily housing projects that we did 10 years ago in this area, maybe that area is a good target for senior housing potentially. Or maybe that's a good area to think about for possible office expansion. So that geographic data can really start to inform business decisions, right? For marketing efforts or for maybe where we might even want to expand our market focus. So obviously we are primarily, we are based in Baltimore, so we're going to get most of our projects are going to be fairly local here, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. But you see we expand all our reach out to California and even to the Bahamas, and I don't even know when those were happening, but at some point in the past. So if we start to drill down a little bit farther, we can, I've built in a button here for sector data. So let's jump to that one. Maybe. Okay, we'll select the tab here. So this is looking at just the data for the sectors we work in. And again, this is fairly similar data here for our projects. Our projects, the locations, it lists the cities, the project costs, project areas, and sectors. And here's a heat map of where those projects all exist. So again, primarily mid-Atlantic region, that's the kind of the hot spot over there. And you start to see a westward migration a little bit, maybe up into to the Wisconsin region. I saw there was an attendee from Wisconsin. We out to California, we're starting to get a bunch of work out in California. And even down here to Peru, we have a project in Peru from who knows when, in the Bahamas. Excuse me, not the Bahamas. I forget which one it is, south of the Cuba and the Dominican Republic. And here's LEED data, LEED or sustainable data. So projects that have attained LEED Silver, we can just select on that bar. And now we start to see it's got that much. We've done about $2 billion worth of, again, this is a highlight, this is not real data, about $2 billion of project construction that have achieved LEED Silver. Even well buildings, done about $71 million in that category. So if I click out of that, I really like this time visualization. So if I highlight a time area, I can start to look at projects that were done in the early 2000s. And we're about $600 million of work. And it was primarily university housing and commercial work. And if I start sliding that to another 5-year increment, we're starting to move much more into university housing. Move that another 5-year increment. And you can see there's quite a bit more cost involved. And again, a lot in commercial and a lot in university housing. So you get the point there that you can see how our sector saturation has really evolved over time since the early 2000s. I can also very much hone in on one sector. So this slicer visual lets me maybe just select university housing, since we saw a lot of that. And you can see it was very active in 2008, 2009. And then ever since 2015 or so, it's been pretty steady. And I can attest to that. We've got a lot of university housing projects. And again, you can see the heat map of where those are happening. And even their LEED ratings, their project areas, project costs. It's really robust information. I'm going to jump into sector financials here, but I'm also going to check the chat just to make sure we're answering questions.
Yeah, it looks like we got another one. It says, can Power BI free version do all this?
So yes, to answer your question, I am using the free version. As I said, we are enterprise subscribers to the Microsoft Business Platform, which gives us the free version. What the free version does not let you do is export out to the web for sharing. And at the end of this presentation, I'll give you guys a QR code so you can open a web-based version of this report and play with it. So yes, to answer your question pointedly, the free version lets you do all of this stuff. I will say this tracer add-in that I showed you in Revit is a paid version. It is not all that expensive, but you can see how powerful it is and what you can glean from using it, amongst the other things that we talked about. In fact, I'm going to actually jump over to the web version since we talked about it, just to show you that. There we go. So again, I'm going to jump over to some of the financials. So here we get in kind of a sense of these are again the sectors we work in, and the two lines are the bottom one is amount billed for those project types, and the top line is total amount under contract for those projects. You can, we can start to slice it by the principal in charge of these projects and start to see what types of projects they specialize in and how their project financials are doing. I can look at, again, this little area tree by project metrics and get, select university housing there, and it starts to hone in on who is primarily working on those in those sectors. And again, I can use that slicer and start to look at that same information in different ways. So I do like the percent build feature here, or function here. Gives a pretty interesting snapshot of how far along a lot of these projects are. One thing I meant to show you in the desktop version, let's go back to that, is aside from these visuals, which are amazing, it gives you a little bit more behind the scenes information about the different data sources that we have imported. So I'm going to look at maybe this sample projections spreadsheet that we had, or maybe this room elements chart. So again, it's just a spreadsheet view, but what I can do is, if it doesn't come in correctly from Excel, I can change how this column shows up. Maybe I don't need all these decimal places, and I can change it to just a 2 decimal place data source. Or I can change the date range to a different format. Or I can change a dollar figure to round down to the nearest 10,000. There's a lot of ways to manipulate it right within Power BI here. This model view, data model view, really starts to reveal all of our data sources and how they can be interconnected in Power BI. So these little sort of connector lines, it looks a little bit like a Dynamo map, right? Or a Dynamo script. But it's really how all of these things are relating to each other and which way the data is flowing from one to the other. Sorry, I can't make it too big, but you start to see, this data is going in 2 directions. And that's all Revit information. So let's go back to the dashboard on the website here. And I'm going to jump to a specific project. And this is, again, this is directly from Tracer, but it's all Revit data. And this is a really cool massing view of all the rooms. So I get a sense of the building mass and where all of the rooms are. All of the rooms in blue are housing rooms, and all of the rooms in yellow are amenity spaces, and all of the sort of that peach color is circulation space. And down here in the corner, I can start to look at what are the ratios of room sizes. So primarily 4-bedroom units is what is being done at this specific project. And if I start to compare other student housing projects, maybe from California and from Virginia, you can start to see maybe there are significant differences in that unit ratios and how that can inform your next project, maybe in California or in the Mid-Atlantic region, and the preferences for the students that are going to those schools. So you can see it gives you area, it gives you all of the space types. I can select on a specific space and see on the little floor plan representation there where it exists on the floor plan. It gives me the area of that room. It's a unit D2.3. I can even just look at one of the levels and start to see how those levels are, rooms are all arranged on a specific floor. And remember, you don't have to be a Revit expert at all to pull out this data. And now anybody can start to use this information. Maybe you take it to a trade show and your marketing team is at a booth, and they have an addressable monitor that can be utilized to show this data and how we go about our design methodology. Just one more project typology to look at as an example here. This is multifamily housing. You can see it's a little bit of a bigger project. It's obviously got a road running through it with a bridge connector. It's a bigger project, and we can, using this visual, I want to just look at where are all the 1-bedroom units. So it highlights them all in the floor plans here, and it also shows that they are all kind of stacked on top of each other, and they are all the inline units. So it becomes a super useful tool for maybe that next intern that's going to come do this kind of work on a new concept design for a project we just won. They start to understand where these typical 1-bedroom units should start to appear. I will also point out that for this typology, the primary types of spaces that people are looking for, and this is down near the Washington, D.C. area, are 1 and 2 bedroom units. And so that makes up about 80% of all of the 87% of all the units in the building. Let's just look at level 1 here, just as one more sort of example. And we'll select the parking garage, and it's about 33,000 square feet. If I wanted to, I could certainly have a report of how many parking spaces are in the garage. And one more example, and this is more of the modeled elements in Revit. And this becomes interesting because I can start to look at some model health or team performance, or how teams are doing complying with firm standards for Revit. So here's a fairly simple project right here in Baltimore. Again, I can spin around it. I can get a sense of its massing. I can see it's got a lot of windows all around the perimeter. And again, it's got about 7,300 walls in it. I can look at maybe just the curtain panels in the project. And then as soon as I select that element, it reveals it in the 3D view here. It reveals what types of curtain panels we have in the project. I will look at the information that you're seeing here in the warnings, model size, and model elements. Those are all coming from that BIM Interoperability Tools add-in. And that is really good information to have so that we can keep track of model health. If this warnings number gets much higher than about 4 per megabyte, we need to start throwing the red flag and starting to fix warnings. The model size is a good one to, if you're approaching a gigabyte for a project that's not very big, there's definitely something wrong. And then this one, let's click out of the detail view there. The RFIs and submittals, if you remember from our Deltek PIM interface, we exported out for this project the CA information. And this is a representation of that. So we have almost 400 submittals for the project. We have almost 154 RFIs. And again, there's a slicer by time. So I can get a sense of maybe I was super busy with submittals and RFIs during this time frame. And what that reveals is, or can start to talk about is, maybe we work with this contractor or this owner fairly often, and we can start to get a sense of how much they hammer us with paperwork. We all know that happens, right? And we can talk about staffing for the next project that might have this contractor on it or this owner on it. Or maybe there's a fee adjustment that we need to start making if we end up not making as much money as we thought we were going to in a specific phase because of CA efforts. So it really starts to reveal some interesting data about that effort during construction over time. And again, I can just look at RFIs or I can just look at submittals. Unfortunately, I can't connect those yet to specific building elements, although I certainly could build in information about maybe there's an RFI pertaining to a certain curtain wall system, and I can add that to the Revit model as part of the data export. Let's check the chat box and the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next question we have here is, can you select data from the MEP model and architecture model and get them to show up on the same table in Power BI?
Yes, you can. Great question. So I'm going to go back to Tracer here. Let's close that one. Whoops. So what happens in Tracer is it's really just looking at the current model that you have open. It is not looking at the linked models. What you do is you have to export, for instance, the MEP model separately. And then in Power BI, what you do is you end up having to merge those databases. And then you can look at all of that data in the same table, in the same visualization at the same time. So I can look at all of the piping in a building, or all of the structural systems in the building, and you start to be able to select those elements and get information about all of that. And yes, you absolutely can create a template in Power BI for adding this information for specific projects or specific sets of data that you want to look at. It's kind of your oyster, and those templates become really powerful. So, you know, ultimately it becomes something where maybe we want to look at profit comparisons by sector, or if you go down to the sector financials, or I want to look at maybe the typical fees we get by state, or maybe it's information about construction costs by geographic region, and how that might impact either our fee, or if we think the cost being allocated by the owner is enough to even get the project done. We can even start to look at team performance. How is a specific project team, like, you know, we know that typically teams do the same type of project typology just to leverage their expertise. How are they doing over time with different projects, you know, in terms of warnings or model size or standards compliance? So I would love to hear from you guys if you think there would be other ways to leverage this data for firms to discuss. I am looking at the Q&A box. How do you run the data collection on multiple projects every week? Steve asks. So the good one about BIM interoperability tools is you can certainly set that up to run on a weekly basis on multiple models. I don't do that because I like to have a little more control over what models are being collected. It doesn't really take a ton of time to do. But yes, you can certainly set those up to run on a scheduled basis on multiple models. And you ask, Robert asks, can I import this to my Revit splash screen? The cool thing is, I wish I had a model open, or a quick model I could jump to, but I do that. I add data about you know, warnings and a bunch of stuff that is good for the project team to know. Right onto my cover page, or my opening page. And that gives them information about, geez, how many duplicate instances do I have in one place, or how many overlapping walls or floors do I have? And that really starts to point out some poor modeling practices that need to be cleaned up. So yeah, good questions. With that, I'm gonna open it up to give you guys the QR code if you want to take a look at this dashboard. I'm going to leave it up for a little while now. Whoops, let's switch my screens here. If you want to take a picture of that and open the report, you can open it right on your mobile device and start to mess around with it. Yeah, again, I'm going to leave this report up for a week or so and then take it down. It is public. So I'll give you a second here to take a shot of that. And then, you know, ultimately, we all want to develop good projects that are well performing for our clients over a long time. For our Wisconsin attendee, this is a project right in Milwaukee. It's a new student housing project in for Marquette University. So love that one. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Just do a quick questions check. All right. Again, thank you for your time. This has been recorded, so it will be up on YouTube soon here.